It's the Center for Battered Women. It's a shelter for those who have been physically and mentally abused. It's the subject of today's Austin Faith Dialogue. Please join us.
Austin Faith Dialogue, at the crossroads of religion and life. A series highlighting the cultural and social interactions between the worshiping and religious communities in and around the capital city. Austin Faith Dialogue is brought to you by the Austin Metropolitan Ministries in cooperation with KXAN. Join us now in Austin Faith Dialogue.
Hello, I'm Richard Thompson of Austin Metropolitan Ministries, welcoming you to this edition of the program. Today we are coming to a subject that is very touching, very important. It's a very tender moment as we think about the service that is given in compassion here in Austin, Texas, toward those who have been physically and mentally abused. It's the Center for Battered Women. And there's no more fitting time for us to contemplate this than in this season when we are commemorating the birth of the Prince of Peace. And to help us to understand that service and to appreciate it, we have two guests. We have, first of all, Sarah Hauk Seaton. And Sarah, you're the manager of public affairs, as I understand.
Yes, I am.
Gail Rice, we welcome you back to the show, having had a chance to interview you some years before, but now you are Community Education Director, I understand?
That's right, Rich. Thank you. It's good to be back.
Good. Well, I think that I think we'll start with you, Gail, because you've been there for a while. How long have you been there, and how did the center start? Give us a little of the origins of it.
Yeah, I wasn't actually there at the start, but got there, you know, like they say, as soon as I could. The center actually started in the summer of 1977, and it grew out of a voluntary association of women who came together in the mid-70s and began to talk about their experiences and realized how much violence, regrettably, was a factor in theirs and their friends' lives.
20 years ago.
Exactly. And so out of their work together, the center was started in a very modest building in West Austin in 1977 and has grown now to the large organization that we are.
Okay, well, I think that we'll come back a little bit to the history of it, but right now let's get a fix, Sarah, on what services that are provided through the center.
We have a 24-hour hotline, a 65-bed shelter for women and children. We have a 26-unit supportive housing apartment community, and we have outreach counseling, legal advocacy, a teen dating violence program, extensive children's programs. We've tried to cover all the bases, and in the 20 years that we've been around, we really have grown a great deal. And
you told me before the show that you also extend services to, certainly to children and indeed to some men.
Yes, we do. All of our services are available to men. If a man is in danger, we do not put him in our shelter, but we do find him housing. And also, our hotline is open to anyone and everyone who needs help dealing with domestic violence, whether they are a victim, whether they are a friend of a victim, family member, or actually a perpetrator of abuse. And we don't offer counseling yet, but we do refer these people to programs in town that we work with.
Okay, well, let's pause just for a moment and fix on the first of those services that you provided. And that is that you've actually got a literal shelter with so many beds. How many did you say?
Well, it has 65 beds. It's up to 65 people, and that's women and children. And we're trying to open up another shelter here pretty soon that would be available to just women unaccompanied by children.
I see.
And that would free up some more space in our what we call our family shelter to get that up to be able to house 70 people, and then 18 women without children could stay in the other shelter. And that's space that we desperately need. We've got a waiting list and always a full house. And
I was going to say, is it always full?
It's pretty much always full, yes.
Okay. Well, I have to say, Gail, again, kind of looking at it in perspective, of how the issue of domestic violence and physical, mental abuse, is it worse now than it was when you first started this in 1977 with, or has
I
it
don't
gotten
think
better?
so, Rich. I don't think so, and I think it's very hard to measure kind of the improvement, because really the bringing forth of this problem and the addressing it is really so new. When you take a longer term perspective, you know, when you realize that about 120, 140 years ago, it was legal for a man to strike his wife. He was entitled to do that, and that the laws really only started changing in the mid 1800s. And that we're still dealing with attitudes that flow from that about entitlement and about the right to use this, to resort to this type of behavior. I mean, I think they're clearly not accepted in the way that they were then, but I think that tradition and belief system is handed on in some ways, and is in some ways a factor in the fact that this continues. But I don't think the problem is worse than it was, and I don't think that it's better. I think that it is more discussed and more on the open and more addressed and more reported.
We've definitely had a crash course in domestic violence over the last 2 or 3 years.
The country, you mean?
The country, and I think more people are aware of it.
What kind of crash course do you mean?
Oh, I think the O.J. Simpson case really brought this issue to the forefront and got people talking about it, got people realizing how big a problem it is. I know they have in this community. And now I've seen people know about it, and now they want to know what they can do about it, which is very encouraging, which is another challenge for us.
So it's more out in the open for sure.
I believe
To
so.
some extent, Rich, but I think because of the inherent nature of this problem, because it involves the relationships between loved ones, it still remains very difficult for an individual person, woman or man, to identify when abuse is happening in my relationship, for me to see it and for me to know where to go and what to do about it. And that's why we appreciate the chance so much to be here and talk with you about it, because women and men in congregations all over the city are dealing with it, and their best friends and family one may not know about it, or two may have some indication, some idea of it, and not know how to help, and the person themselves may not know. And so we welcome the opportunity to dialogue with congregations, with rabbis, priests, ministers, pastors of all kinds.
Yeah, I was just beginning to kind of fill in the blank here, read between the lines, because when you say to dialogue with congregations, it's not just to go and say, this is our service and we welcome your support.
Right.
Or like put us into your budget sort of thing.
No.
Rather, what you're saying in a way is domestic violence occurs among church members just like it does in the larger society.
Oh, yes.
Or in congregations.
Transcends all boundaries.
Oh, yes.
Racial, economic, religious. It's a very prevalent problem without any good formulas for solving.
And because it is as hidden as it is, it'd be tough to come up with statistics about how widespread it is at any given moment.
Well, there are some statistics. I think anytime we talk about this, we have to, kind of reserve a bit of judgment about statistics. But a study that was done in Texas just about 5 years ago came up with 8%. Of the women that they asked, how many of you have had one incident of physical abuse in the last 12 months? It was 8%, so about 1 in 12. Would that be women? And then when they asked those same women, how many of you since the age of 18 have had at least one incident? And this is just physical abuse. This isn't even talking about psychological and emotional abuse. Since the age of 18, it was 1 in 4 had some.
Okay.
And this fits in with national statistics that show somewhere between 8 and 13%. Usually when random studies are done, if you talk about the last 12 months, that's what comes up. So,
One in every 4 women will be physically abused sometime during her lifetime. It's a pretty
Rather than talking in such abstract terms, though, let's just picture, without naming anyone's name, but give us just an image of who comes to your facility, what their condition is, and then what you can do with them while they're there. I think Sarah, have you had any direct hands-on experience of this sort?
I have had very little. Gail is much more experienced in that sort of thing than I am. I am on the periphery, and I hear more about it than actually deal with it.
Okay.
And I think probably our answers would be very, comparable, of course. But really, Rich, clearly people that come to the shelter are going to be people with less financial resources or less access at this particular point in their life to financial resources. So the women who are staying at the center are typically they're struggling financially.
I gotcha.
They're struggling. Now they may just be they may just need a place to stay till they get 2 paychecks, and then they can, go on. But a number of folks are not employed and are struggling to put together the means of supporting themselves and their kids. Now, where you see a difference, of course, is if you look at the range of people who call our hotline or who come to our resource center
Right,
for
our outreach
face-to-face
counseling.
counseling,
Right.
and that's where you see, wives from socioeconomic strata across the board. Wives of professional people themselves, just across the board.
So they don't necessarily come to the center to avail themselves of your services under those kinds of circumstances?
You're talking about the shelter?
Yes.
Yeah, the shelter is just, we consider the shelter one part of the center, because really we've grown beyond. We're really, trying to move our services or develop our preventive services more and more.
Okay.
So we really like people to think of us not primarily as a shelter. We're very much a shelter and no less a shelter. But we want people to feel, Rich, that they can call and talk to us before they are at the desperate straits where they need a safe place to go.
Okay. Well, now your reference to calling reminds me, we have a phone number.
Yes.
Let's put it
Yes,
up there
put it
so
up
that
there, okay.
people can respond sooner rather than later. And that number is
928-9070, 24 hours a day.
24 hours.
Anyone
Okay.
can call.
And have any idea how many people you reached that way?
Oh, we had over 11,000 calls last year to our hotline. It's and I
Almost
think we're
1,000 a month.
It is running just about that.
right.
And actually, in the percentage, I noticed that this year the percentage of those callers who were requesting shelter had actually increased a little bit, not a whole lot, but a little bit.
When we come back, I'd like to, since we're airing this during the holiday season, and we know there are lots of stresses and strains within family relations over this time of year. We might give some thought as to just exactly what this means in terms of the services that you're called upon to render. And then I'd like to also talk a little bit more about our relations to the churches and the congregations. But we've got to pause here to catch our breath and to let our viewers take a break as well. We'll be right back in just a moment on Austin Faith Dialogue. Hello, we're back again on Austin Faith Dialogue, where today our subject is the Center for Abuse, for those who are suffering physical and mental abuse, the Center for Battered Women. And we have with us the 2 staff people that were hear the first half. You haven't gone away. I'm glad for that.
Right here.
Right here, not going
Thank
anywhere.
you, Sarah Halk-Seaton and Gail Rice. I think that before I forget it, we need to take note of the fact that as of the first of the year, you all are going to be involved in merging with another group here in town. Could you tell us about that?
Yes, the Center for Battered Women and the Austin Rape Crisis Center will become one agency. Our new name will be Safe Place, Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault Survival Center. Both the hotlines are going to say the same, 440-RAPE for the sexual assault hotline, and the number that was shown earlier, 928-9070, will be the domestic violence hotline. But we will be one united agency. Oftentimes sexual assault and domestic violence become intertwined. And we thought that to join forces and to come together, we would become a stronger agency and be better for the people we serve.
Mm-hmm. So as of the first of the year, you will no longer be the Center for Battered Women.
No.
And the Austin Rape Crisis, you will be Safe Place.
Safe Place.
All right.
Yes.
We'll try to remember that.
Thank
and
you.
The rest of the title, I don't think that we
We
can...
will too.
Yeah, that's
We're
right.
still practicing.
Just Safe Place. Just remember
Yeah.
Safe Place. That'd be.
Also, during the break, you were saying that you wanted to highlight the fact that if somebody calls and they can't get in right away into the shelter, not to give up.
Or actually into the non-residential counseling services also, because that's a place that a lot of people enter that never go to the shelter, but they want to come in and sit down and talk with someone face to face about what they're experiencing, and is it abuse, and if it is, what are their options.
They don't give up, what do they do?
They need to call back. Actually, and we will explain, when they call, we will explain that we only schedule so far out. And so the main message, Rich, I'd like people to know is that if we can't get them in immediately the first time they call, we should be able, typically we can get women into service within a week to 10 days for either of those services.
I see.
But they do have to be willing, to call back. And in some cases we can call them back if that's permissible with them. So it just
Okay.
depends.
And we're very fortunate. We have a wonderful team on our hotline of case managers, so that even if the shelter is full, they can offer great many services to those people in need.
While they're on the waiting list.
While they're on the waiting list, safety planning, job referrals, that sort of thing. So it's very necessary for people to know to call and keep calling. And
See, I've been sitting here thinking you're getting about 1,000 calls a month. How many people do you have down there answering the phone?
Well, they're usually, there are 3 or 4 folks that are available. There's one main person at any given time, and then she has backup with 3 or 4 other people, typically. So, but they stay very busy.
They're busy.
It's very demanding.
very busy,
It's
but they're so good at what they do.
yeah,
Very, very good.
it is. It is.
Well, I did say that I wanted to visit a little bit about the holidays. Well, we associate this time of year, Christmas, family reunions, as warm. We're supposed to have just very positive feelings about all that, and hopefully we will. But I also know as a pastor, as I was serving churches over the years, I began to realize that was when there could be stresses and strains that could erupt in abuse of one sort or another. Do you find that your calls for services increase over the holidays?
I think the calls during the holidays are pretty solid, and we're busy, but there's not an increase. When we see the increases after the holidays, very many women want to hold it together during the holidays. They want to keep the peace. They want it for their family, for their children. So they walk on eggshells through the holidays, and the tension builds, like you were talking about, and it usually explodes into a violent episode after the holidays. And that's when we see a peak in hotline calls. That's been across the board over the last few years. Just, in January, we've got
You can
lots
just
of calls.
almost expect it.
Yes.
And since you've been with the center over a longer period of time, you've seen that same
That's
pattern?
been the case. It has been, Rich.
It's not exact science, but that's definitely what we see.
Right. And so we want, I guess one message that we particularly want to get out at this time of year is how important it is to put one's safety, to be encouraged to put one's safety you know, before the tradition, in other words. And, you know, women will call and say, I want my children to have their own tree and to have their own Christmas. And that's what we all want. And as you say, hopefully that will be possible. But we want people to know that we're open and we're working and we're receiving, taking calls, and we're there to support and to help. And if danger, you know, if the risk to their safety and their children's safety increases over the holidays, then we want not to wait.
Don't wait
Right.
until the new year.
Right.
Do it immediately.
And Rich, there's one thing I would like to be sure to touch on, and that is we want to be very clear that we offer all our services to same-sex people in same-sex relationships, gays and lesbians as well.
I see.
Because that isn't always clear to people. And I've talked to a lot of both gay men and we have a support group for lesbian women, and we talk to a lot of gay men and offer them all our services. Again, abuse is no respecter of any of our categories of how we describe or define ourselves.
You know, and I'm also glad to say that in the season of the Prince of Peace, how important it is, and here I'm verging on a little preaching, so you'll bear with me here, but I'm just glad to say that so often peace is thought of as being, you know, make no waves and just keep the lid on, and that when Jesus came and spoke about peace, it was not to become a doormat for someone. It was to be a whole person in relationship to whole people.
That's a very good point.
And so that maybe one of the messages during the holidays to keep before folks is that there's a false sense of peace, or a false understanding of that sometimes gets mixed up with what Jesus said was just to be a person of integrity, to love yourself as well as to love others. How does that sound?
Well, it sounds absolutely on the mark, you know, and I think because this is what we would hope that religious leaders would address this directly from the pulpit or from wherever they're standing, to say that while we want to, while we revere and respect the sacrament of marriage, and we want to observe that when behavior arises that in fact breaks that sacrament and breaks that trust and puts people's lives and physical integrity at risk, then we need to have a way to take a stand against that. And we believe that it is congruent with Christian beliefs to do so. And I think it's very important for religious leaders to stand up and clearly say that, because that's a lot of times what is one of the barriers to women taking, or to anyone, woman or man, taking a step, is that they're trying to live by precepts that they believe require them to stay and take whatever is dealt out.
Okay, you were going to say something.
Right,
else.
we were talking about that earlier, and that's one of the barriers for women of faith.
Trying to live a moral and ethical life and to stand, excuse me.
It's all right. No, she always says things better.
Go ahead.
Yes.
Go ahead. No, I do not. Go ahead.
Trying, like what she said, trying to live in what they perceive to be God's way. That should not ever be a reason to stay in a violent or abusive relationship. That isn't being true to yourself and God's child that you are. and so that's very important. And the safety
of the children, for sure.
That's right.
Well,
I think that even without physical abuse, if there is sustained emotional abuse, there is a kind of death of the spirit that happens.
Which if they find afterwards can be very healing and wonderful. The spiritual is another role that congregations and churches can play in the healing process.
Tell us a little bit about your relationship to the churches. You spoke about speaking before groups and perhaps in worship services, and what else do you do to
Well, it really
cultivate
depends,
those?
you know, on the interest and where a particular group is in their interest. There's one congregation that we're talking about that's interested in looking at the work that they do with engaged couples, the pre-marriage counseling, and they're interested in really addressing some of these hard topics more directly in the pre-marriage counseling. So we're having a dialogue with them about how to do that. Our teen dating violence prevention program, a lot of the schools welcome our volunteers and staff in to talk to their young people about, again, recognizing what is abusive behavior, what's respectful behavior, how do I have and nurture a healthy relationship.
which is very difficult. A lot of people don't realize, they don't have anything to compare it to. So this is healthy, this is not healthy. Maybe they can prevent some abuse from happening before it gets too.
Do you speak in schools? And
I don't personally. I think I have a couple of times, but that's a separate department.
that's a whole separate
like Gail was
organization.
talking about. It's just we're just try to expand and don't cover all the bases, and that's a part of the Center for Battered Women. It's our teen dating violence program.
Right.
And we do speak in a lot of schools.
A lot
And
of
this
schools.
spring we're starting our really first organized program in elementary schools.
We got a grant from the Centers for Disease Control.
Oh, you did?
And it's a pilot program, and we're going to see how it works, and hopefully it can be duplicated in schools across the country, much like our teen dating violence program is now.
Do you get any resistance to working in schools from those who say that this is the type of education that belongs in the church and in the home?
Not so far. Not so far. And you know, we're very clear in our program that it's education, not counseling. And we believe that it addresses, there's a great deal of concern about violence in the schools. And there's a lot of concern for teaching conflict resolution and mediation. And we think a vital part of that is the gender piece. Because a lot of conflict is engendered or around male-female behavior, male-female relationships.
And our elementary program is going to be very different from our teen.
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
It's building blocks of healthy relationships.
Influencing pre-dating behavior.
Yeah, with beginning with little kids.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I think that one of the things, too, is that you've got the influence of television as projecting role models and situations that can be picked up that are not healthy. I mean, this is not to pass judgment on all such programming, but the fact is that it seems to me there'd be no substitute for one-on-one or immediate direct contact with folks.
Right. And these programs also help identify children at risk, children who have violence already in their homes, who have already experienced violence in their relationships. So it really is a very solid prevention program.
Prevention you mentioned earlier, and it sounds like you're putting more and more stress on that.
We're trying to get ahead of the river. Yes, we can pull people out. I think Gloria Steinem is that,
I think so.
Pull people out of the river, and that's fine, and that's wonderful, and that's definitely necessary. But we do want to get to the front and help people from falling in as well.
Right. Well, that's a good note to end on, to have a sense of serving folks even before they need your service. And we want to thank you for the service of your being here today, Sarah
Thank
and
you.
Gail.
Thank you. Thanks, Rich.
And we'd like to welcome you folks to be with us again next week on Austin Faith Dialogue, when we're going to have a year-ender program to look back over 1997. Be with us, and peace be with you.